I am here on the red carpet for A Small Light. It's a new series for National Geographic that is going to be about the Lady Meep guys who helped hide Anne Frank. It's going to be super interesting and moving, and I'm really excited to see it tonight and to cover the red carpet.
I think Meep is such an inspiring young woman. I think she's so brave, and there's so much to be learned from her story. I think working on this project has given me such a new perspective on life. I think that what Meep did was so brave, and I always think in my own life, if I was in her shoes, what would I have done? And I think there's such a powerful message to this story. Meep is such an inspiring young woman, and that's why I love this story so much.
I mean, so many things. Like Meep Geese is this ordinary woman going through this extraordinary thing, this incredibly brave hero who's just like any of us. And I think that people can learn from her that, anyone can do heroic things like that.
I hope that people watch this show because they're engaged in the characters, they relate to them, they feel like they could be her or she could be their friend. And then ultimately, I'm listening to what he's saying because I'm going to kind of say what he's saying. But basically, we live in really challenging times. I'm sure every decade people say that, but it feels like the world is teetering in some ways, and that it really requires people to be actively engaged in changing things and participating in conversations about humanity and equality and all of that. So it feels like the moment to be telling these stories, and to be able to do it in a non-black and white, non-history book way was really exciting to me. So I hope people take away that they should also question authority and question whether they're doing enough to really help change the status quo, because the status quo right now is scary.
I hope they take away what really they went through, their story, that it was dark, but they always had hope, always did, and I hope that they take that away from the show.
Really just that anybody can be a hero. I mean, Meep famously said, "Don't call me a hero, even a secretary or a teenage girl can be a small light in a dark room," and that's where the title comes from. And it's really just, she was so immediate when Otto Frank asked her to save his family. She didn't hesitate. And even when he said, "You really need to think about this because your life will be in danger," she was like, I don't need to hesitate at all. And I think that we all have that capacity. And especially in today's world when there's so much division and so much anger and misunderstanding. Her example really shines pretty brightly.
Well, at the beginning of this shoot, I actually read Meep's account, which is called Anne Frank Remembered, which I had learned such a different perspective from Anne's perspective through that. And then I also obviously reread Anne Frank's diary, and I learned a lot. I was trying to pick out everything with Margot's perspective in it as I was playing Margot. And what I learned was that there's a lot of talk about, Margot being really smart and Margot having all these qualities, but I also didn't want to take away from the fact that those were people's perspectives on Margot, so I tried to do a little bit of my own take. But from Anne's story, it's such an inspiring story because it's a story of persistence, story of courage. That's why Anne Frank's diary has lived on for so long. So it's so special.
Was that hard? I did. Doing the accent.
It wasn't that hard. Actually, in my initial auditions, I was told by both casting directors, we had an American casting director and a London casting director, and they both were asking if I was British. So I was very, very, happy to be able to, I love accent work. And then I also had a dialect coach on A Small Light so that I could kind of have an accent that was similar to Billy's and Anne's. So it wasn't that hard.
I think so. I mean, I think that Anne Frank is one of those figures in history who's so iconic that to focus on Anne herself is tricky because she's this figure that's held up, and to do a show about Anne, you kind of can't really get into like the fact that she was just a normal teenager with issues without people saying, but that's Anne Frank and she has to sort of be this martyr of history. But Meep is a different way into that story, you know? So you can look at Anne from the perspective of her sort of a big sister figure in her life, you know? So yeah, I'm hoping that people can find Anne to be like a relatable character in that narrative too.
At first, when I first went into this, I didn't know much about her, but I learned that she's a very cheeky little girl, and I really enjoyed playing that and getting into that and biting into that sort of herself, because obviously she's not a character, she's a true person, so I had to really try and get into her mindset, and that really is what drives her, so I really enjoyed getting into that. Yes, I audiobooked it. But I did, when I was doing the auditions, I was audiobooking the whole time so I could really get to know it. Because in school, I never got the chance to read the diary, which I know loads of people did, but I didn't, unfortunately. But I loved reading it. It was such a breaking story. It really was, but I love getting to know Anne. Yeah.
I think that our take on this story is so special in the fact that
or the show itself.
we show real life people and we show the everyday activities that were going on in the annex, what was happening outside of the annex, and we show, you know, the resilience of these characters. They were celebrating Hanukkah in a time where it was so hard to be proud of your religion, and these people were resilient in the fact that they were still having those celebrations and they were still able to kind of keep up a little bit of hope. And that's what's so inspiring about the Frank family story, is that even in the darkest moments they were still able to bring some light.
Hopefully a lot, and also just seeing the humanity in it. And we all know the Diary of Anne Frank, we all know about this part of history, we've all read the textbooks, but this is really digging down under that and getting into the emotion of it.
Well, it's interesting because all of our information about the Frank family comes from Anne's diary, comes from the perspective of a 15-year-old girl. And Meep had a very different perspective on that. And I think especially in terms of characters like her mom and Dr. Pfeffer, who she was forced to kind of live with in the same room, a 15-year-old girl's attitude towards those people is very different than an adult's. So I think it gives us a much deeper and more fully formed understanding of who those people were and the challenge that they had in living in those very small quarters for 2 years.
Well, I'm not the writer or creator of the show, so I came onto it after Tony and Joan had created the idea of telling, like they basically came up with the idea of telling a story about her. But, you know, I grew up Jewish in America, albeit very reformed, casually, culturally Jewish, but not a good Jew. But I knew who Meep was. You know, that was something that was taught in schools, and I just was aware of her. And so to get a chance to really delve into her story was really exciting. But I wanted to participate in telling some story that was meaningful to me, especially post-COVID. I felt like the projects I want to spend my time on are projects that contribute to some aspect of the cultural conversation and help make the world think in some way, even some small way. So this felt like just such a project to me, you know.
Well, I'm going to mention this later on, but about 7 years ago, my wife and I, who is the co-showrunner with me, took our kids to Amsterdam, and we went to the Anne Frank Museum. And while we were there, we were looking at these plaques and reading about Meep, and we saw that Meep was so young when Otto asked her to do this. And I looked over at my son, who was 20 at the time, and I'm like, this is a very smart kid. He went to an Ivy League college, but if I asked him to get back to the hotel, he would have no idea. And I was like, that's an interesting story. This newly married young woman who seemingly is totally ill-suited to do this work, figured it out and did it. The amazing thing about the project was that everybody who read it, to a person, the actors, wanted to be a part of it. And so I've never had that happen before. And so that was really exciting. And the cast that we were able to assemble is so fantastic and so wonderful, and not only kind of have inhabited the spirit of these people, but bring their own craft and skill to the project in a way that I think people are going to be very excited by.
Well, I was curious. It's like about you've gotten a chance to do quite a few things in your career, but this is a chance to be able to play a historic person that was real. And I was curious about how you approached this. That may have been different from some of the other things you've done.
Well, I mean, it felt like a huge responsibility, obviously, which is a little bit daunting. Me actually wrote her own book called Anne Frank Remembered, so I use that as kind of my main source of research. But also Tony and Joan's writing is so modern and accessible and natural that it was kind of easy to just lift it off the page.
I guess it's like we talked a little bit about history during the course of talking with other people here on the red carpet. That how some stories need to get told, and this is one that's being told now. Do you see that we're maybe primed to be able to hear these voices and
See the way what?
do you think this is a good time to hear from Meek and be able to know
I
her
mean,
in this way?
I think it's better late than never. I think there are a lot of female heroes out there that we haven't heard about just because of how the world used to operate. But now they're all coming out of the woodwork, and of course, it's great to hear her story.
Hi, everybody. So I was so excited about having the experience to record on the red carpet and to cover the red carpet for A Small Light that I forgot to record an outro. And so I thought I would do it now, and especially because I happen to be in my fancy dress. And so I thought that would be kind of perfect for red carpet. But I'm really grateful to everybody at South by Southwest for helping me to have that experience. It was really fun, and I learned a ton, and I just had a great time. So I hope you all enjoyed it. And please like this video, please subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. And also check out over on Rotoscopers. They were so great in helping me to get there. So definitely check out all of their great content over there. And please, if you are listening to the podcast, please leave your ratings and reviews. I'd really appreciate that. And check out the Patreon and merch store. That's the best way that you can help me. And again, thank you for the experience. And let me know if you get to watch A Small Light on Disney Plus, what you think. And thanks so much. Bye.